It was a crisp autumn morning in Washington, D.C., the kind where the sun struggles to peek through the clouds, yet the city still hums with life. Inside the grand chambers of the U.S. District Court, the tension was palpable. The air was thick with anticipation, and every eye in the room was on the woman who was about to make history, Pam Bondi, the United States Attorney General. Her reputation preceded her. Known for her relentless pursuit of justice and her no-nonsense approach, Pam had become a household name across America. But today, she was facing an adversary unlike any other. Judge Robert Langston, a seasoned figure in the court system, had long been a figure of authority respected by many for his years on the bench. But behind the veneer of respectability, Langston had been hiding a secret that, if exposed, could bring down more than just his career. It could shake the foundations of the very judicial system. Bondi had been working tirelessly on a case involving corruption within the court system. Her investigation had uncovered evidence of bribery, embezzlement, and fraudulent rulings that had been orchestrated by some of the most trusted individuals in the judiciary. And at the heart of it all was Judge Langston. Pam Bondi's path to this moment had been paved with relentless determination. She had spent months gathering evidence, interviewing whistleblowers, and meticulously piecing together the puzzle of Langston's illicit activities. What started as a small lead had blossomed into something far more sinister. The judge, it seemed, had been on the payroll of a powerful criminal syndicate operating within the city, influencing court decisions to favor their illegal activities. Today, in this very courtroom, Pam was ready to expose it all. As the clock ticked toward the appointed hour, Bondi stood before the judge, her demeanor calm yet focused. She had always been known for her poise, but there was something different in the air today. Her eyes, sharp and determined, scanned the room, meeting the gaze of every onlooker, attorneys, journalists, and officials alike. They all knew something monumental was about to unfold. Judge Langston sat high on the bench, his face unreadable, his eyes hidden behind the dark rims of his glasses. He was the picture of composure, as if he had nothing to fear. But Bondi could see the subtle twitch in his jaw, the way his fingers drummed nervously against the wooden surface. She knew that deep down, Langston understood what was coming. "Your Honor," Pam began, her voice clear and unwavering, "I stand before this court not only as the Attorney General but as someone who believes in the rule of law, someone who believes that justice should be blind and fair for all. Unfortunately, it has become evident to me and to many others that Judge Robert Langston has betrayed the very principles he swore to uphold." Gasps filled the room. The court officers exchanged glances and the jury shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The silence that followed was deafening. Pam continued, "Through an extensive investigation, we have uncovered irrefutable evidence that Judge Langston has been accepting bribes in exchange for favorable rulings. He has manipulated the system for his personal gain, allowing criminals to walk free while innocent people suffer. This is not a small matter, Your Honor. This is an affront to every citizen who relies on our courts for justice." Judge Langston's face remained calm, but Bondi could see his knuckles whiten as he gripped the edge of the bench. He had expected some level of scrutiny, but not this level of exposure. The room seemed to hold its breath as Pam slid a folder across the table toward the judge, the weight of her evidence evident in every movement. "Your Honor," she continued, her voice steady as a rock, "I have here the documents that prove your involvement in these crimes. Bank transfers, communication logs, witness testimonies, everything that links you directly to the criminal enterprise you've been aiding." She paused for a moment, allowing the gravity of her words to settle in. The room was silent, save for the sound of a distant clock ticking, counting down the seconds until the storm would finally break. Langston's eyes flickered for a moment, a brief flash of panic crossing his features before he masked it with a practiced smile. "This is a baseless accusation, General Bondi," he said, his voice smooth and confident, though there was a hint of tension. "I have served this court with honor and integrity for over 30 years. I am not the criminal you make me out to be." But Pam Bondi was not one to back down. She leaned in slightly, locking eyes with the judge. "The truth has a way of coming to light, Your Honor. And today, it's coming for you." The courtroom was a cacophony of hushed whispers. Attorneys exchanged glances, and the jurors were visibly unsettled. Pam Bondi had just thrown the proverbial gauntlet in the face of Judge Robert Langston, and the courtroom was still reeling from the shockwave. Yet Pam remained composed, unwavering in her stance. Judge Langston's face had momentarily flushed with anger, but he quickly regained his neutral expression, clearing his throat to regain control. "I assure you, General Bondi," he said, his voice slightly more strained, "you are gravely mistaken. You will regret these accusations. This is a court of law, not a political theater." Bondi's eyes never left Langston as she folded her arms across her chest, unbothered by his attempts at intimidation. I've already made my decision, Your Honor. The only regret you'll have today is not heeding the warnings you were given long before this moment. There was a long pause as Langston scanned the room, his mind clearly racing. He hadn't expected Bondi to come armed with such comprehensive evidence. He had always believed that his position was untouchable, that his decades of service and reputation would shield him from any real consequences. But Bondi wasn't one to play by the usual rules. She was relentless, methodical, and driven by a sense of justice that transcended political affiliations. Your Honor, Bondi continued, her voice carrying across the room, this is not just about the money or the deals you made in the shadows. This is about the lives you've ruined. The criminals who walked free because of your corrupt influence. The innocent people who suffered because you chose to serve the highest bidder rather than the truth. Langston's hands tightened into fists beneath the bench, his knuckles turning white. He opened his mouth to speak but was interrupted by the sound of a voice that carried a weight of authority no one in the room could ignore. General Bondi is correct, Your Honor. The voice came from the back of the courtroom, cutting through the tense atmosphere like a knife. The doors creaked open and in walked a tall man with a commanding presence. U.S. Marshals flanked him as he stepped into the aisle, his eyes locked on Langston with an intensity that sent a chill down everyone's spine. It was FBI Special Agent Mark Hamilton, the lead investigator in the case against Langston. Behind him, 2 other agents walked in, each holding a set of files and documents. Agent Hamilton, Bondi acknowledged, her voice now taking on a tone of victory. I trust you have everything in order. Hamilton nodded curtly. Everything's been confirmed, General. We have corroborating evidence. The documents in Langston's possession, his communications with known criminal organizations, and his personal financial records all point to his involvement. Langston's face paled, the color draining from his features as he looked at the group of agents standing near the back of the room. The truth was closing in on him. He had spent years weaving a complex web of lies and deceit, and now it was all coming undone. There was no escape. Mr. Langston, Agent Hamilton continued, walking toward the judge's bench, we have a warrant for your arrest. You are charged with multiple counts of bribery, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The entire courtroom went silent. Bondi could feel the weight of the moment hanging in the air, the power of justice about to be unleashed. This was a victory not just for her, but for every person who had ever been failed by the system, for every person who had ever believed that corruption could go unpunished. Langston's mouth hung open for a moment as though the words were too much for him to comprehend. He shot a glance at Bondi, but there was no sympathy in her eyes, only cold resolve. The man who had once held the power to shape lives now stood at the mercy of those he had wronged. Is this some sort of joke? Langston finally managed to ask, his voice rising in desperation. You can't do this. I am a federal judge. You can't arrest me. Hamilton didn't flinch. He turned toward the U.S. Marshals who had stepped forward, their hands already ready to apprehend the judge. We're not asking for permission, Judge Langston, Hamilton said firmly. We're here to serve a warrant. Please come with us. Langston's hands shook as he stood from his chair. His earlier bravado had vanished, replaced by panic. He staggered backward, eyes darting to the exit, but he was surrounded. There was no way out. I won't go quietly, Langston spat, his voice full of rage, but his defiance was hollow. The agents moved swiftly, each one grabbing one of his arms and leading him out of the courtroom. For a long moment, the room remained eerily silent, as if the walls themselves were taking in the magnitude of what had just transpired. Then, as Langston was led away, the sound of a single gavel echoed through the chamber. Court is adjourned, the presiding judge said, his voice thick with disbelief at the events that had just unfolded before him. As the agents escorted Langston out of the courtroom, Bondi stood at the center of the room, her face stoic. The weight of the victory was there, but it wasn't about her, it was about the justice that had been served. It was about the people who had been waiting for someone to take a stand, to show that no one, not even a judge, was above the law. Pam, you did it, a voice said from behind her. It was Hamilton, his expression a mix of admiration and respect. Pam nodded, her eyes still fixed on the door where Langston had disappeared. We did it, she corrected him, her voice quiet but filled with a sense of purpose. The courthouse buzzed with chatter as people filed out, some still in shock, others discussing the events that had just unfolded. Outside, reporters swarmed, microphones in hand, eager to get a statement from anyone connected to the case. Pam Bondi, however, wasn't in the mood for interviews. She had one goal now, ensuring that Langston faced the full weight of justice. But as she walked down the courthouse steps, the weight of the moment hit her. It wasn't over yet. This victory was just the beginning. The day had been nothing short of dramatic. The arrest of a sitting federal judge in open court was unheard of, but Pam Bondi had orchestrated the perfect takedown. She had exposed Langston's corruption to the world and ensured that the truth would no longer be buried beneath a facade of judicial integrity. But she knew all too well that Langston wasn't the only one involved. He had been the tip of the iceberg, a puppet in a much larger criminal operation. Pam had only just begun to scratch the surface, and the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. Langston might be behind bars, but the people who had been pulling the strings were still out there, and they wouldn't go down without a fight. "General, over here." A reporter's voice broke through Pam's thoughts, pulling her back to the present. She glanced over to see a news crew approaching, their cameras ready to capture her every word. Pam gave a small, controlled nod, signaling that she was willing to speak. "General Bondi, can you confirm that today's events mark the beginning of a wider investigation into corruption within the judiciary?" one of the reporters asked, thrusting a microphone in front of her. Pam paused for a moment, gathering her thoughts before responding. Today, justice was served. But this isn't just about one corrupt judge. This is about rooting out the rot that has infected our judicial system, ensuring that everyone, from the lowest criminal to the highest official, is held accountable for their actions. Another reporter quickly chimed in, "Do you believe this is just the tip of the iceberg? That more judges or officials may be implicated?" Pam's gaze hardened as she looked into the camera. "Absolutely. What we saw today is just the beginning. We've already identified connections between Judge Langston and organized crime syndicates, but we're going to follow the trail wherever it leads. No one is above the law, not Langston, not anyone." The reporters scribbled in their notebooks, trying to capture every word, but Pam had already moved on. She didn't want to bask in the glory of the moment. Her mind was focused on the next step. That evening, as the news coverage of Langston's arrest dominated the airwaves, Pam sat in her office reviewing the case files. The evidence was overwhelming: money transfers, phone records, encrypted messages linking Langston to several known criminals. But she couldn't afford to get complacent. There were powerful people out there who would stop at nothing to protect their own. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Hamilton entered the room, holding a stack of papers. His face was tense, and there was a sense of urgency in his movements. "We've been going through Langston's files," he said, placing the stack on her desk. "There's more here than we thought. He wasn't just taking bribes. He was helping organize fake trials, manipulating verdicts to benefit a network of drug cartels, human traffickers, and even political figures. It's all connected." Pam leaned forward, scanning the documents. "How deep does this go?" "Very deep," Hamilton replied grimly. "There are names on these lists, prominent figures from both sides of the aisle, people with power who have been covering their tracks for years. Langston wasn't acting alone, but he's been the linchpin holding it all together." Pam's mind raced as she processed the information. The corruption she had uncovered was far-reaching, and it wasn't just about Langston anymore. It was about a system that had allowed these individuals to thrive unchecked. She knew she couldn't take down the entire network in one swift move. It would take time, careful planning, and the right alliances. But Langston's arrest was a significant first step. "I need a full list of every name in those files," Pam said, her voice low but firm. "And I want you to start tracking down the other judges he worked with. We're going after them one by one. No one is getting away with this." Hamilton nodded. "I'll have my team start working on it immediately. But we need to be careful. If these people are as connected as we think, there could be retaliation. They'll want to protect their own." "I know," Pam said, her eyes narrowing. "But I'm not backing down. These people have been abusing their power for far too long, and it's time someone held them accountable." The rest of the night was spent strategizing. They drafted warrants, analyzed more evidence, and laid the groundwork for the next phase of the operation. Pam's phone buzzed frequently with updates from her team and political allies, but she remained focused. She had a mission, and nothing would distract her from it. The following days were a blur. Langston's arrest had sent shockwaves through the media, and the public was in an uproar. Social media was flooded with discussions about the case, with some expressing shock and disbelief, while others hailed Pam Bondi as a hero. But for Pam, the accolades were fleeting. She couldn't afford to get caught up in the praise. Her focus was on the next phase of the investigation, taking down the network behind Langston. With every step, the case grew larger and the stakes became higher. Pam received numerous threats, some subtle, others more direct. But she remained unshaken. She knew that those who had been hiding in the shadows would stop at nothing to protect their empire. But she also knew that she had the law and the people on her side. Then, just as the investigation was gaining momentum, Pam received a call that made her heart race. "General Bondi," Hamilton said, his voice tight, "we've got a problem. Langston is singing, and he's offering names. Big names. In exchange for a plea deal." Pam felt her pulse quicken. Langston had never been one to cooperate with law enforcement before. But now that the walls were closing in on him, he had a choice. Face decades in prison or turn on his former allies. "Who's he giving up?" Pam asked, already preparing herself for the worst. "We don't know yet, but he's asking for protection. He's scared, General, and he's willing to give us anything we want." The phone call with Hamilton hung in the air like a heavy storm cloud. Pam Bondi sat at her desk, her mind racing with the implications of what she had just heard. Langston, the once untouchable judge, was willing to cooperate? It was a significant development, but Pam knew better than anyone that criminals didn't make deals out of the goodness of their hearts. Langston wasn't surrendering willingly, he was cornered, and in his desperation, he was offering whatever he thought would save him. But the question remained, could Pam trust him? Her fingers drummed steadily on the desk, each tap echoing the ticking clock of the investigation. The stakes had just been raised, and Pam knew that she needed to act quickly. Langston's willingness to flip could unravel everything, but only if she played her cards right. "I need a meeting with him, Hamilton," Pam said firmly, her voice unwavering. "Set it up, but make sure there are no deals made yet. I want to hear what he has to say, and I want it on the record." "I'll make the arrangements," Hamilton replied. "But I'll warn you, Langston's not going to make this easy. He's asking for a lot, including witness protection." Pam's mind shifted to the logistics. Witness protection meant that Langston had information on the people at the top, those who were pulling the strings. It meant more than just his personal survival, it meant exposing the system that had allowed such corruption to run rampant for years. Pam looked out of her office window, deep in thought. If Langston truly had valuable information, it could be the key to dismantling the entire criminal network that had taken root in the judiciary. But making a deal with him would be a risk. She had to weigh the consequences carefully. Could they guarantee his safety? Could they trust him not to lie, to twist the truth for his own benefit? It didn't take long for Hamilton to call her back. The meeting was set for the following day, behind closed doors, with only the necessary people in attendance. No press, no distractions, just the raw conversation between a corrupt judge and the Attorney General who had made it her mission to bring him down. The next day, Pam entered the secure room at FBI headquarters, her resolve steely. Hamilton was already there, as well as a couple of agents who would be present to ensure the integrity of the meeting. Langston was escorted in shortly thereafter, looking less the proud judge and more like a man who had seen the writing on the wall. His once meticulously groomed appearance was now slightly disheveled, his shoulders slumped with the weight of his own surrender. His once pristine black robes had been replaced by the standard orange jumpsuit of a federal detainee. Langston didn't meet Pam's eyes immediately. He stared at the floor as he took his seat across from her. Pam could tell that he was trying to retain some semblance of dignity, but it was clear he was not the same man who had once presided over cases with the confidence of a king. "Judge Langston," Pam began, her voice steady but unyielding. "You've made it clear that you're willing to cooperate. But before we get into specifics, let me make one thing clear. I don't deal with criminals, even ones who were once judges. If you want protection, if you want anything, it will be based on your full cooperation. Anything less and you'll get nothing." Langston finally lifted his eyes to meet hers. His gaze was tired, defeated. "I know what's at stake, General. I've made my mistakes. And I'm not asking for forgiveness, just for a chance to make things right. The people I've worked with, they don't care about me. They don't care about anyone but themselves. And now they're coming for me. If I give you their names, if I help you expose them, I want protection. I want a new life." Pam leaned back in her chair, studying him. This was not the arrogant judge who had once held power over the lives of countless defendants. This was a broken man, a man who had no other choice but to come to her for help. But Pam wasn't interested in his sob story. She wanted the truth. "You say you want to make things right," Pam said. "So tell me what you know. Who is behind the corruption you've been part of? Who are the people who have been pulling your strings, making you compromise your integrity?" Langston took a deep breath, the weight of his confession heavy in the air. "It's not just judges, General. It's politicians, high-ranking officials, law enforcement, even people with ties to organized crime. There's a network, a very powerful one, that has been controlling the outcome of cases for years. I was just a cog in the machine, but I was one of the most important cogs. They trusted me because I could control the verdicts, I could manipulate the cases. It was a system built on money, power, and influence, and it reached far beyond the courthouse. Pam's mind raced. The names and connections he was hinting at were like an explosion of possibilities. The very fabric of the justice system was being unraveled in front of her. The corruption Langston was talking about wasn't just about bribery or bad decisions, it was about a shadow network of people with their hands in every corner of American society. This could be bigger than she had ever anticipated. I need specifics, Langston, she pressed. Give me names, dates, locations. Who are the key players? How far does this go? Langston hesitated, his eyes flickering nervously. I can't give you all of it at once. They'll know I've turned. But I'll give you a start. There's a group, an elite group of political donors who've been laundering money through legal settlements. They've been bribing judges, including me, to ensure that cases involving their businesses get favorable outcomes. Some of them have ties to international crime syndicates. They've been using the courts to launder money and cover up their operations. Pam's pen moved quickly as she took notes. This was the breakthrough she needed. This was the moment that could change everything. But even as she absorbed the information, she knew it wasn't enough. Langston was only giving her the tip of the iceberg. There was so much more beneath the surface. If you want my protection, Langston, Pam said, her voice cold, you'll have to give me more. I want the full story. And I want it soon. Langston nodded, a mixture of fear and resolve in his eyes. You'll have it. I'll give you everything. Pam Bondi knew this was her moment. Langston's cooperation had cracked open a door she'd been trying to pry open for months. She could feel the weight of the investigation shifting beneath her. The truth was coming to light, and the criminals who thought they could manipulate the system were starting to realize that their days of impunity were over. But Langston's information wasn't the full story, not yet. Pam needed more. She needed to build an airtight case that would bring down the entire network. The names Langston had given her were crucial, but they were just the beginning. Pam had to connect the dots, track down every player involved, and ensure that no one slipped through the cracks. For the next few days, Pam and her team worked around the clock. FBI agents, analysts, and prosecutors combed through Langston's files, following every lead. They tracked down witnesses who had once been too afraid to speak out. They pored over bank records, wiretaps, and encrypted messages that had been intercepted during the investigation. It was an intricate puzzle, each piece coming together one step at a time. One name, in particular, kept coming up in Langston's testimony, Senator Thomas Harlow, a powerful political figure with deep ties to several key players in the criminal syndicate Langston had been involved with. Harlow had been a frequent donor to judicial campaigns, and his influence stretched far beyond the courtroom. The more Pam learned about Harlow, the more she realized that he was at the heart of this corruption. If she could take him down, it would be a devastating blow to the entire network. Pam knew she had to act quickly. Harlow was a slippery figure, well-connected, wealthy, and with an army of lawyers at his disposal. He had been operating in the shadows for years, pulling strings behind the scenes, and he wasn't going to let this investigation stop him. Pam's gut told her that if they didn't move fast, Harlow would find a way to cover his tracks and disappear into the folds of power once again. Hamilton, Pam said, her voice sharp and commanding as she paced the room. I need you to start working on a case against Senator Harlow. We've got a window of opportunity, but it's closing fast. Use everything Langston's given us. Every name, every transaction. I want to build a case strong enough to bring him down. Hamilton nodded. Understood. I'll get my team on it right away. But we're going to need more than just the testimony. We need hard evidence. Documents, recordings, anything that proves Harlow's involvement. I know, Pam replied, already formulating a plan. Langston's testimony is just the beginning, but we can't wait for the perfect evidence. We need to hit Harlow hard and fast. We'll bring him in for questioning, apply pressure, and see if he cracks. If he does, it will give us the leverage we need to go after the rest of the network. That night, Pam sat alone in her office reviewing the details of the case. She thought back to everything that had led her here, her years as Florida's Attorney General, her relentless pursuit of justice, her commitment to rooting out corruption wherever it lay. She had spent her career battling corruption, but this case was different. It wasn't just about a few bad actors, it was about an entire system that had been broken for years. And Pam was determined to fix it no matter the cost. The next morning, everything changed. Hamilton walked into Pam's office with a grim expression. "We've got him. Harlow's on his way to the FBI headquarters. He's been subpoenaed for questioning." Pam didn't hesitate. "Good. Let's make sure we're ready. Have the team in place and make sure Harlow knows we mean business." When Senator Harlow arrived, he wasn't alone. His high-powered legal team accompanied him, their expensive suits and polished demeanor standing in stark contrast to the gritty determination of the FBI agents surrounding them. Harlow, a man used to controlling every room he entered, walked into the interrogation room with a sense of calm arrogance. But Pam could see through the act. He knew the walls were closing in. Harlow took a seat, his posture stiff, and looked directly at Pam. "I'm not sure what this is about, General, but I assure you I've done nothing wrong. I've worked my entire life to build this career, and I won't have it ruined by baseless accusations." Pam remained calm, but there was a fire behind her eyes. "Senator Harlow, you've been connected to a network of criminal activity that stretches all the way into our judiciary. We have evidence linking you to bribes, money laundering, and the manipulation of court cases. Your influence has corrupted the very system you swore to uphold." Harlow's expression faltered for just a moment before he regained his composure. "This is a political witch hunt. I'm an elected official and I've always worked within the bounds of the law. If you have any evidence, I suggest you present it." Pam slid a folder across the table, a stack of documents containing irrefutable evidence. "You want evidence, Senator? Here's what we have: records of payments from your campaign donors, wire transfers that connect you to criminal enterprises, and correspondence between you and Judge Langston, among others. This is just the beginning." Harlow's face went pale as he scanned the documents. His usual bravado melted away, replaced by a flicker of fear. Pam could see the realization dawning on him. This was no longer a game. His carefully constructed world of power and influence was starting to crumble. "You've got one chance, Senator," Pam said, her voice unwavering. "Cooperate with us and you might get a deal. Refuse and you'll be exposed for the criminal you are. We're not going to stop until we've taken down every last one of you." Harlow leaned back in his chair, his mind clearly racing. After a tense silence, he finally spoke. "I'll talk, but I want immunity. I want protection for my family." Pam didn't flinch. "You'll get nothing unless you give us everything. And I mean everything. All of the names. All of the deals. Every last detail." The room fell silent as Harlow weighed his options. Then, with a resigned sigh, he nodded. "Fine. I'll give you what you want. But you have to promise me one thing: my family's safety." Pam's eyes hardened. "You're not in a position to make demands, Senator. But I'll make sure your family is taken care of if you tell us everything." Senator Harlow's cooperation marked a turning point in the investigation. With his testimony, Pam Bondi and her team were able to dismantle the corruption that had plagued the judicial system for years. It wasn't easy. There were threats, cover-ups, and even attempts on her life, but Pam never wavered. Langston, Harlow, and dozens of others were arrested, and the criminal syndicate they had supported was taken down. The exposure of the corruption rocked the nation, leading to widespread reforms and greater transparency within the justice system. Pam Bondi had kept her promise. No one was above the law. For Pam, the victory was bittersweet. The battle had been won, but the war against corruption would never truly end. There would always be more to uncover, more to fight for. But for now, Pam allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction. She had exposed the truth, brought the guilty to justice, and helped restore faith in the system. And that, in the end, was what mattered most.